The night was wild and merciless. Dark clouds roared across the vast African savanna, their fury illuminated by streaks of white lightning that tore through the heavens. The wind howled, bending tall grasses in waves, and the scent of wet earth filled the air as rain poured relentlessly. Amidst the storm's chaos, a lone figure moved through the downpour, her silhouette barely visible beneath a heavy, tattered cloak. She clutched a tiny bundle to her chest, shielding it from the cold with trembling hands. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps, her eyes darting through the darkness as if expecting a shadow to follow her. But she was alone, alone with the storm, alone with the terrible weight of her decision. At last, she reached the base of an ancient baobab tree, its thick, gnarled roots twisting into the earth like the hands of forgotten gods. Kneeling, she placed the baby on the damp ground, her fingers lingering on the soft cloth wrapped around the child. The infant whimpered, a sound so fragile it was nearly lost beneath the rolling thunder. The woman inhaled sharply, her resolve wavering as she leaned closer. "Forgive me," she whispered, her voice breaking. For a single heartbeat, she hesitated, caught between love and fear. Then, as the sky split with a deafening crack of thunder, she turned abruptly and ran. Her cloak billowed behind her, vanishing into the rain-soaked wilderness, leaving only the echoes of her footsteps in the storm. The baby's cries rose in the darkness, small and desperate. The storm raged on, indifferent. But deep in the shadows, something stirred. A pair of golden eyes flickered in the night, unblinking, watching. A lioness stepped forward, her powerful form moving with quiet grace. Her ears pricked forward at the sound of the child. She sniffed the air, then padded closer. She did not attack. Instead, she lowered her head, nuzzling the tiny bundle with surprising gentleness. The baby's cries quieted, as if instinctively soothed by the creature's presence. A low rumble vibrated through the lioness's chest. Not a growl, but something softer, almost maternal. With careful precision, she took the infant in her jaws, cradling it between her teeth the way she would her own cub. Then, without a backward glance, she turned and disappeared into the wilderness. The baobab tree stood silent in the rain, bearing witness to a secret that would one day change everything. As the sun broke over the savanna, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world fresh and glistening with dew. Birds called to the morning, and the wind whispered through the leaves. Hidden within a den nestled between the roots of an acacia tree, the lioness carefully set the baby down on the soft earth. Around her, her own cubs stirred, their eyes curious as they approached this strange, new creature. The baby, Amara, whimpered, uncertain in this unfamiliar place. The lioness responded with a deep, comforting hum, curling her body protectively around the child. From that moment, Amara was no longer just a lost human. She was part of the pride. Days turned into weeks. The lioness nursed her alongside her cubs, grooming her with rough yet affectionate licks. Amara, in turn, adapted to the ways of the wild. She crawled alongside her feline siblings, learned to drink from clear streams, and tumbled in playful scuffles with the cubs. She understood the language of the jungle, the rustling of leaves, the calls of unseen creatures, the warning growls of her lioness mother. As she grew, so did her instincts. She climbed trees with ease, her limbs strong from constant movement. She hunted in her own way, catching insects with quick, nimble fingers. The jungle was her home, her teacher, her protector. The sound of a lion's roar was not something to fear, but a song she had always known. For years, this was her world, and she never imagined anything beyond it. Until the day everything changed. The afternoon was warm, the air thick with the scent of ripe fruit. Amara, now a teenager, moved soundlessly through the tall grasses near the edge of the savanna, her sharp eyes scanning for food. Her wild, sun-kissed hair fell loosely down her back, and her body was lean and strong from years of running, climbing, surviving. She had never known any other way to live. Then, a sharp sound shattered the quiet. A spear struck the ground near her feet, vibrating with the force of its impact. Amara froze, her muscles tensing, her senses instantly alert. She whipped around, her keen gaze searching the terrain. A figure stepped forward from the shadows. A young man, his expression a mixture of astonishment and uncertainty. He was unlike anything she had seen before. He wore clothes, rough and patched from use. A bough rested at his side, his hands steady but cautious. His dark eyes were locked onto her, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. A barefoot girl, poised like a predator, her stance both wary and unafraid. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Then, the boy slowly raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I won't hurt you," he said softly, his voice careful, measured. "Who are you?" Amara tilted her head, mirroring his stance, her mind struggling to place meaning in his words. They were strange, foreign. She had never spoken before, not like this. But something deep within her stirred, something long buried beneath the life she had known. The boy hesitated, then pointed to himself. "Kofi." She blinked. After a pause, she mimicked the motion, pressing a hand to her chest. "Amara." The name felt unfamiliar, yet familiar all at once, as if it had always been waiting for her to claim it. Encouraged, Kofi extended his hand, palm up, a silent offering. Amara hesitated. A part of her screamed to run, to return to the safety of the jungle. But another part, a part she did not understand, urged her to reach forward. Slowly, her fingers brushed against his palm. And just like that, the invisible boundary between her world and his was crossed. The village was unlike anything she had ever seen. Huts with thatched roofs clustered together, smoke curling from cooking fires. Children ran through the dusty pathways, their laughter ringing through the air. Women carried baskets of grain, while elders sat beneath the shade of a sprawling acacia tree, their voices weaving stories of old. As Amara walked beside Kofi, the village quieted. Whispers rippled through the crowd, eyes filled with both wonder and fear. "The child of the lions," someone murmured. Kofi led her to his home, a modest hut at the village's edge. His mother, Ao, stepped outside. The moment her gaze met Amara's, she froze. A flicker of something unreadable passed through her eyes. Shock, recognition, perhaps even regret. But she quickly masked it, offering a quiet, hesitant welcome. Amara sensed the tension, but remained silent. The village was overwhelming, its customs unfamiliar. She struggled to learn, to eat from bowls, to sit at tables, to use words instead of gestures. Yet, just as she had adapted to the jungle, she adapted here. But even as the villagers' fear faded into curiosity, a part of her remained restless. She missed the rustling trees, the scent of wet earth, the distant roar of her lion family. And in Ao's cautious gaze, a secret lingered, one that, when revealed, would change everything Amara thought she knew about herself. Amara turned to Kofi, her face pale but resolute. "She left me," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. "She left me in the jungle when I was a baby." Kofi's confusion quickly turned into disbelief. He looked at his mother, his voice rising with urgency. "What is she saying? Is this true?" Ao nodded, her tears falling faster now. "Kofi, I didn't know she was alive. I didn't know it was her." The realization hit Kofi like a crashing wave. His voice broke as he spoke, his words filled with shock. "Amara, you're my sister?" The truth settled over them like a heavy storm cloud. Amara took a step back, her instincts screaming at her to flee. Without another word, she turned and rushed out of the house, leaving Ao sobbing and Kofi frozen in shock. Outside, the village bustled with joyful preparations, oblivious to the heartbreak unfolding inside. But for Amara, the world had shifted irreversibly. She no longer knew where she belonged. Overwhelmed by the weight of the truth, she felt the jungle calling her back, the only sanctuary she had ever known. At the edge of the village, where the human world met the untamed wilderness, the jungle stretched before her. The towering trees swayed gently in the breeze, their shadows stretching long in the soft golden light of early morning. The air was still, as if the jungle itself was waiting. Amara stood there, staring at the trees she once called home. In her arms, she carried a small bundle, the only belonging she had from her brief and painful time in the village. Her wild hair moved slightly in the wind, and though she stood strong, a trace of sadness lingered in her posture. Kofi approached her slowly, his steps hesitant. His voice was steady but filled with emotion as he pleaded with her not to leave. Amara turned just enough to meet his gaze. In a quiet voice, she told him, "This is not my home." Kofi took a step closer, desperation creeping into his tone. "We can figure this out together," he insisted. "Your past doesn't matter. Only you do." But Amara shook her head, gently yet firmly. "My place is in the jungle," she said. "It's where I was saved, where I was raised. It's where I belong." Kofi's face fell. His hands dropped to his sides as he struggled to find words, but deep inside, he knew she was right. He took a step back, defeated. Behind him, Ao stood in silence. Her shoulders were hunched, her face streaked with tears. She did not try to stop Amara. She knew she had no right. Regret weighed heavily on her, but she remained quiet. Amara took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. Then, with steady steps, she turned fully toward the jungle. As she walked away, her figure grew smaller, blending into the shadows of the trees. From the depths of the jungle, a figure emerged, the lioness. Her golden eyes locked onto Amara. For a moment, they stood still, watching each other. Then, the lioness moved forward, her powerful body gliding silently through the forest. Amara knelt as the lioness reached her. The bundle in her arms slipped to the ground, forgotten. The lioness leaned in, nuzzling Amara gently. Despite her fierce nature, there was undeniable tenderness in her touch. Amara wrapped her arms around the lioness, burying her face in the warm fur. This was her protector, her mother in every way that mattered. For a fleeting moment, everything else, the village, the pain, the tangled human connections, vanished. In this moment, there was only Amara and the jungle, together again. From the edge of the village, Kofi watched, his heart heavy with loss. But alongside his sorrow, there was understanding. He knew she was returning to where she truly belonged, even if it meant leaving him behind. Ao wiped her tears and turned back toward the village, her steps slow and burdened with regret. As Amara disappeared into the green depths of the jungle, the lioness walking beside her, the wilderness seemed to exhale a silent welcome home. Deep in the jungle, where the trees stood thick and tall, sunlight broke through in golden patches. The jungle was alive, untouched by time, its vibrant colors and sounds weaving a symphony of life. By a crystal-clear stream, Amara sat cross-legged, calm and at peace. The water flowed gently, reflecting the sunlight in shimmering ripples. She tilted her head, studying her reflection. For the first time, she felt no doubt about who she was. She belonged here, not as a visitor, but as part of the jungle itself. Behind her, the lioness rested in the shade while her cubs played nearby. One cub, braver than the others, trotted over and nudged Amara's side. She laughed softly, reaching out to scratch its ears. Her laughter blended with the songs of birds and the rustling leaves, a harmony of wildness and peace. Back in the village, the mood was quieter. Kofi stood at the edge of the savannah, staring toward the thick jungle in the distance. The village bustled with life, but he barely noticed. His thoughts remained with Amara. In his mind, he saw her graceful, moving effortlessly through the trees, her figure blending with the shifting light and shadows. He missed her already, her laughter, the way she was so deeply connected to the earth. But he also understood she had never truly belonged to the village. She belonged to the jungle, to the lions that raised her, to the wild spirit that shaped her. As time passed, Amara's story became a legend among the villagers. They spoke of her with wonder and respect, calling her the child of the lions, a girl who straddled the worlds of humans and beasts. To some, she was a symbol of courage. To others, a reminder of the deep connection between nature and mankind. But to Amara, none of that mattered. She did not live for legends. She spent her days running through the jungle, caring for her lion family, protecting the wild. She was the jungle's guardian, living quietly, purposefully. As the sun set, the jungle stirred with the sounds of the night. Amara sat once more by the stream, gazing at her reflection. And this time she smiled. For the first time, the image staring back at her felt complete. She was not torn between two worlds. She was exactly where she was meant to be, a part of the jungle, forever. Moral of the story: if life roars at you, just find a lion to raise you. Problem solved.